The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. My name's Nate Heininger, and I am joined by two very cool co-hosts,
Laura Nash
and Raygan Kelly.
And this week we are talking about Boyfriend Dungeon, a game produced by or developed by Kit Fox Games. It's out on Steam, Switch, Xbox One for $20. Relatively recent release, just sometime in the last few weeks, right?
Mm-hmm. And, also relevant while we're talking about where the game is available, it is also on Gamepass. So
nice.
Both PC and Xbox.
We've got a lot to talk about with this game. This is a really, really interesting one, and I'm glad the two of you are here with me to talk about this game. I spent a fair amount of time in it. So, Laura, why don't you kick us off here with a sort of a summary or an outline of what this game is?
Well, Boyfriend Dungeon's tagline is level up your love, and it has, by somehow not the press kit, been called a slash and smooch.
Nice.
Which I think is appropriate. It is equal parts boyfriend and dungeon. So it's pretty high concept, but bear with me. This is not all the weirdness in the game, but it's just lean into it. The idea is you've never dated anyone, so you move to Verona Beach to live in your cousin's sublet, like you do. And you also have the power to wield weapons that are also people. And when you fight with them in dungeons by wielding them, the dungeons that are full of monsters that are manifestations of your inner demons, you grow your love bond. And then when you get to a certain amount of XP, you date them. That's the game. Yeah. Summer lovin'. Yeah. Date your weapons.
So, it is. It's funny. This is really the second dungeon crawling boyfriend simulator that we've played this year. The first one, of course, being Hades. Mm-hmm. So I found some similarities between those games, and I'm thinking we got the birth of a genre here.
I hope so. Honestly, I enjoyed both of these games. I think this suffers a little bit by comparison to Hades.
Yeah,
but this game has a different focus.
It's not actually a fair comparison, but it is funny.
It's not.
But this has a lot more romance, though.
That's the thing. This leans so much more into its sort of dating sim elements than Hades didn't have exactly dating sim elements, but it did have highly smoochable characters.
But if you look online, you certainly would think Hades was a dating simulator.
Whereas this game leans so hard into the romance side of things.
I was actually surprised early on with this game that, I knew it was a dating simulator. It's all over everything, but I was actually surprised how much dungeon there is in this game.
Yeah, that was my first
Laura said 50-50, but I would actually say this game is probably at least 70-30 in favor of more dungeon crawling than dating in terms of how much time is spent, which was also a surprise to me. I know that sort of the it depends probably on how good and fast you are at getting through dungeons and how many characters you're spending time dating and so on. But I definitely spent the majority of my time in the dunge, as they called it in this.
Yeah, the dunge.
That said, you can find little spots of the dunge for a break, which is like a mini date.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, there's still dating all the way through the dungeon. You're still taking your sword or weapon into the dungeon is a date in and of itself.
Yeah, and I know that Laura kind of outlined the like broad strokes or the high concept here, but I really want to lean on how fun it is that it combines these two by having your weapons also all be dateable, smoochable people. Mm-hmm. That's a really brilliant conceit. Where you're continually throughout the game meeting new hotties. A whole variety of hotties for every romantic taste. It says on the tin boyfriend dungeon, but there are girlfriends, there are non-binary dateable weapons. All of them can turn into weapons, and there's I think they're doing fun thematic stuff with each of these characters has their own story, their own backstory, their own hang-ups, their own romantic interests, and in very cute ways, sometimes those stories kind of tie into things about how each of them represents a different playstyle in the dungeon. So I'm probably I haven't dated as many of these folks as you guys have, so maybe I won't do the best job of explaining.
An easy one is one of the early weapons, Sundar, who is a talwar, which is it's really cool looking red sword, and we will talk about Sundar and his many traits, but I will say that when you level up the relationship and you get new powers, new levels, his all are about like causing things to bleed and like bleed faster. And you're like, why is this a theme? There are reasons. I won't spoil for you.
And there's a dagger character, which is all about faster play and moving around a lot faster. So you are sort of
avoiding harm.
Yeah.
She's damaged.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, but it's always balanced though, because like, one of my favorite weapons to play with was one of my least favorite people to try and date. So that made an interesting choice that I've never had in a dungeon crawling game, which is I really like this weapon, but I don't like its personality. So I'm going to use, something else.
I have to say, like, most of their personalities, they have a little bit of depth. All of these characters are, I wouldn't say any of them are like incredible, like deep stories, but all of them have, their sort of first impression, and then you learn a little bit more about them. And I think all of them will appeal to somebody.
The tropes are beautifully layered.
Yeah, there's almost always a thing that you unpack a little bit from every character. And it's like any other dating sim. It's all, fed to you in little bite-sized pieces, and you're going through a ton of tiny interactions with all of these people where you learn more and more about them. If you decide to, of course, you can just completely, disregard people if you want to as well.
That said, I will say that you say there's a lot of dungeon and boyfriend dungeon, but I think the amount you commit to people will also change your length of your game. I just want to say that up front. Like, if you're worried, like, this is a short game if you don't want to date everybody completely. If you do that, I have no idea how long the game is.
Well, I can tell you, I think I have played more of this game from an hour standpoint than the two of you. However, I think both of you have progressed further in the overall story of the game than I have, because it kind of took me a little while to understand the gameplay loop and kind of what was happening. And I also just really like dungeon crawling games. And so I was kind of dating everyone, just out here, just having a good time, just seeing the world, just being a person about town, and so it's had me like, I've been essentially leveling up almost every character except for one.
Whereas I really focused just on two. And that I think, propelled me forward in the story a little bit faster.
Yeah, I'll say that there are two ways to progress this game. There's character love progression, and there is going through the levels of the dungeon. And the strict plot is the dungeon depth and getting through the final boss. Yeah. And the completionist is dating all the characters. So just calibrate accordingly.
Yeah, you need to have in order to complete the game, you need to have gone through both of the major dungeons in the game
and the final boss.
You need to have the final boss. But in order to face the final boss, you have to have maxed out the love level of at least one weapon that you take with you to the final boss. But if you get into this and you realize, Isaac the Estoc isn't for me, and I don't want to go on a second date with him, you don't have to. You will unlock weapons continually as you raid the dungeon, and as you continue to meet these new weapons, you can decide, I really want to spend more time with this one, either for playstyle reasons or for just dating and story reasons. And you will eventually, even if you decide you're a one blade man or woman, you will be able to complete this game. You don't have to go completionist and date everybody, but you may very well want to.
But before we get into who we liked dating and dungeon diving with, I do think it's worth taking a quick step back to talk about one plot element that is pretty overarching. It's continuous. I wouldn't say it is a large part of the plot, even
it's
though
the closest the game has to a antagonist,
right,
or villain.
It's also tied into some of the discourse around this game. Kitbox Games recently updated this to include stalker content warnings. I will give my women in the audience, this does not have rape. No one's going to try to rape you in this game. That often comes with stalker games. So I just want to put that out, not in this game. That said, there is a person who doesn't leave you alone, even though you've told him you're not interested. And that's a big part of the plot.
And in a way that, like, I'm coming at this from a male perspective and not having a lot of life experience of this sort of stuff. But it surprised me both in that, like, it does this element of it. I can certainly understand why people might respond negatively to that, because it does have a sort of
not one of your weapons also.
Right. Yes. Very important.
Just very important.
Side character, essentially.
Yeah.
But this side character that becomes a stalker over the course of the story, the writing of that felt very real in a way that I can certainly see why folks, if this was something that they really wanted to avoid in their fiction or in their fun time dating cutie game, right, that they would potentially want to avoid this, because it does feel very real. There's certain elements in it that just sort of feel like unpleasant or awkward or like awkward bordering on dangerous guys that I have met or seen. But also the level, it doesn't, and again, this is coming from me, the like cis white guy who hasn't dated in over a decade, so maybe Laura can say otherwise, but for me it didn't rise to the level of like feeling dangerous or interrupting my story. It felt like a sort of a natural part of the story these developers were wanting to tell. We're going to talk about the specifics of this when we get to the spoiler break, so I can't go into detail here yet, but I don't know, in the interests of both acknowledging the discourse, because it is a lot of what people have been talking about this game, for better or worse, and also providing a sort of a content warning here for folks who've been seeing this discourse and maybe want a little more information about, is this game something that I need to worry about? Then my vote is I thought it was well written, interesting, and not particularly troubling, but then again, my life experience wouldn't have intersected with this so much. Laura, what are your thoughts on it?
I think that for me personally, I have not had a stalker, but I have had guys who would not stop texting and would not stop,
Laura, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Raygan, you were not
just Raygan. Yeah.
He just wants me to play Puyo Puyo. That's different. No, I think that, that has been an experience I've had. I think for me, it was much more like, this is often in romance novels, there is like a dangerous, like a bad choice or a dangerous protagonist. And those get very thriller action movie often. At the end, there are some very dire circumstances that like romance novels get in before the heroine rescues herself in a more modern book, or the hero rescues them in an older book. So I think, like, to me, this felt like it was borrowing a little bit from that and making it more realistic. I think that it's not a serial killer-y obsession of the stalker, but it is uncomfortable, and it's made to make you feel uncomfortable. And you're dating everybody and having all these good feelings. It's a sour note in the mix, and I am okay with that. I'm glad I knew in advance, because it might have thrown me, but I don't think I needed to know it was. I don't think I deserved to know in advance, but that's on the. But that
I think it might have been more troubling if I'd gone into this game thinking he was one of the dateable weapon hotties, and found, once I discovered his bad personality, that
I'd feel completely different if I was duped into playing with a weapon. Instead, I went on one date with this person. And then he kept going. Like,
yeah,
I did not go on a second date. I think it's just a little different. Like, he's not in my I don't have to commit to this character.
He has, I mean, I hope this isn't too spoilery, but like there are some moments within this that did like have a sort of a raw realness to me. Like there's a particular moment, like you have that first date with him, and it's kind of clear from that, you know, he seems charming at first, and then he has some ideas that seem very unpleasant. There's a lot about him that's like specifically on the like controlling, he's not to get too into the weeds yet, but like his whole deal is like he doesn't like the idea that people have to use other people as weapons. He wants to make, he's a blacksmith. He makes weapons that he can control and that don't have their own ideas. And that's part of his relationship with you too.
I thought this was going to go kind of in the direction of the play Boy Gets Girl, which is where they go on a first date that goes okay, and then everybody interprets his stalking behavior as normalized good behavior. It's
everybody knows he's creepy.
In the intermission, they even play like every love song, like, and then you realize how creepy love song lyrics are. But in this one, everyone knows he's creepy and everyone wants to protect you. It's just a little different, right? Like it's a different flavor. It's not like gaslighting the main character.
What stood out to me was how many tactics he uses to try to continue to involve you in his life. The thing that stood out to me was like the very first time that when he asks you on a second date, he does it by telling you that he has important information that you need. I forget exactly what it was, but like there's a moment in the game where like he has some big piece of information that you really want to know about, partially for your own protection, because I forget exactly what it was all about, but it's something to do with the dungeons and whatnot. And he tells you, yeah, I'll tell you. Just come by my store, it'll be a little date. And so he's continually setting up these moments where like either he's popping in out of nowhere and being your bad penny that doesn't go away, or he's continuing to find ways to manipulate you any way he can into interacting with him in ways that felt really, that felt really real. Like I've never had that experience, but like it really felt like this was written from a perspective of someone who knows the tactics that people like this use.
That said, percentage of the game is pretty low. It's a continuous, it is a regular thread. It's not something you can avoid. It's intrinsic to the plot, but it's not like 20% of this game is a stalker simulation.
No, yeah. It's part of setting up the ending, but It is like, it's really just maybe...
It's like Bowser popping into a Mario game. Like Bowser has, like there's Bowser cutscene.
Bowser's really problematic too, actually.
Yeah. He is.
We come right down to it.
So... All right. What was I going to say? You killed me with the Bowser comment. So I did not know any of this coming into this because... I'm an ignorant person, and I what I thought was interesting, or I guess a credit to the writing of it is that like it's correct that he's unappealing out of the gates, but it is in such an interesting, unique way that like or it's such like a nuanced way that I as a player character like was like, oh, I don't want to date this guy. This guy is annoying, and he seems a little...
He's racist against weapon people.
Yeah, like there's some problems here, so I'm not going to date him. I'm going to, turn him down. But I didn't... And then he proceeds to do all the things that you guys have been talking about. I had kind of thought that, like, if you turn down anyone, they're going to continue to be a part of the game and continue to like pursue you in a way. Because in my play experience, he was the only one that I turned down. I've been spending so much time in this game because I've been like dating everyone and seeing all of their storylines all the way through. And he was the only one that I did not proceed with. So I thought it was just like, oh, I bet if I had dated Eric, he's still going to be racist.
Literally everybody is going to be like an incredibly awful stalker.
Well, not necessarily his version of being turned down, but I had thought that there was like a state in this game that like if you turn guys down or people down, they maintain an element of like connectivity to you, whether it's like this or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the case, but
that should also bring up like another game besides Mario, apparently. But I also thought about Bug Snacks, where like you can just leave the townspeople and their kind of problems if you don't want to engage with them, or you can do all the side quests and try to help them self-actualize. Like this, that felt like they could have done that. You don't try the game is not fix Eric. But
no.
Shall we talk
God.
about the happier people?
Yes.
So one of the things I love about this game, and this is very small, but I just love it, is every time you meet a new character, there's this like anime as hell intro where like they are, I mean, it is like, you know, the camera's spinning around them as their hair is flipping in the wind and their eyes are gleaming, and then they may or may not
They're
turn
magical
into
girl transitions. You can see where the money went in this game.
It's a specific Kickstarter. It's like a specific tier of like, if you kick to this, we're going to give a guy money specifically to do transformations. And I was like, please, everyone, let's get up to this tier.
Worth the money. It was awesome. I also like how they sort of blended your standard dungeon crawling experience with dating simulators in other ways. So there is a crafting system in this game, but all it does is allow you to build gifts or the majority of what you're building with it is gifts that you're going to give to the people that you're dating. In a normal dating sim, you'd acquire those maybe, you know, through you have money and you purchase them and you're slowly growing money or whatever. This is a crafting system. You have to find like 4 plastic and a like, I don't know, like some fabric, and somehow you're able to turn that into like a bottle of wine or whatever. It's completely, it makes
like
no
12 sugars, liquid, and fabric vodka.
Yeah, and then you get a little it reminded me of Breath of the Wild when you're cooking. You get a little ding 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 like workshop scene where you're making the item, but it's completely random stuff. It's like bracelets and red roses, and then my favorite, pepperoni pizza, which I just love the scene of like, I think I was like deep down in the dungeon, me and my date had just gotten off of some massage chairs, which it's a mall. Of course, there's massage chairs. Had this really emotional moment, and then the game's like, do you want to give a gift? I'm like, hey, babe, here's a pepperoni pizza. And they're like, oh, my God, thank you so much. I was like, this is the one for me. So
Nate, they know about your pizzas and how romantic they are.
I know. It's good. It's good to see yourself represented in games. So I just thought that was like, it's completely unnecessary. Like, you know, the items, you're going to acquire them no matter what. You're getting them at roughly the pace of the game growing. You're never like, oh, I got to go farm fabrics or whatever to make this gift, because it's doesn't really matter that much anyway. But I just thought it was funny to have a crafting thing in a dungeon simulator. And then there's also your outfits. You have like a hat and clothes, and then some of it is cosmetic. But it took me a little while to realize there is equipment that can improve your, gives you stat improvements. And so it leads to you having like, you know, I spent like a good amount of this game wearing a leather jacket and a bicycle helmet, because that was like it's a good look, first of all. And then, you know, also it helped out in the dungeon.
I was resistant to crafting them because I went out and bought an outfit, and I was like, this is what I'm going to wear the whole game. And I'm going to wear these designer sunglasses that my Laser Saber 7 gave me. And then I was like, oh, definitely the clothing is a stat boost. I can't just wear my
I was really into my outfit, and then I realized, I have to wear this incredibly ugly like red crown if I want like a mid-dungeon revive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'll wear the ugly crown, I guess, but then it has you wearing it like as you're walking around town. Fortunately, it doesn't show your portrait during dates, which I think would have taken me out of it more. It really only shows your little avatar, which is like a little squat chibi avatar when you're in the dungeon or like on menu screens and things like that.
I think they made the stat boost ones purposefully ridiculous compared to some of the other ones, so that you're like, you know, you do look and, you know, insane wearing these things.
I also think to incentivize us to try to make it, because it's not like they tell you in advance they're stat boosting, but like,
Yeah.
you want to make a leather jacket because leather jackets are cool.
Well, of course. There's way more stuff that's not a stat boost, but it's out there and it's worth finding. So it's worth crafting everything. There's like a little zine thing going on, which gives you like an alternate fire, which is kind of cool.
Your spells.
It's pretty, it's spells. It's pretty minor.
I use those very little. I thought they were sort of underpowered.
Oh, I use this. I use the sleepy time.
Oh, that one was the one that was the
Yeah.
most effective. Yeah,
There's
depends
the
on which weapon you're using.
Sure.
The helmet lets you carry an extra drink, which is your health. It's bubble teas.
I love that.
At reduce the amount of zines that you carry, and I was like, I'll make that trade all day. It's way better.
So I want to talk a little bit about, before we get into talking about the characters, because that is, I think, where we're probably going to want to spend the most of our time, because that is the thing that's like most juicy about this game.
It's a dating simulator. What else are, that's what you're here for. This one just also happens to have a whole dungeon.
But I want to talk about the mechanics of the dungeon crawling, because this plays like a top-down action RPG-esque dungeon crawl. If you've played something like Hades, this I think is going to feel very familiar to you, or really anything, even like a Zelda style thing. It's doing procedurally generated dungeons, as far as I can tell, that you are exploring and revealing the map layouts as you go, and the dungeons have many floors, and it has the sort of standard, like certain floors have elevators where you can come back to that floor when you want to come back without starting from the beginning. If you die in the dungeon, you just get evacuated by a ambulance. There's like very little in the way of like downsides. So you pretty much just go until you die. It doesn't have like a big, negative effect if you die in the dungeon. You just pop right back out and try again later. And maybe you have to play a floor again. I think that the dungeon crawling here is like 70% of the game, and it's fine. I wouldn't recommend this game based solely off of its dungeon crawling. I'd say there's a ton of other dungeon crawling games where if what you want is a game that's super fun to just go floor after floor and fight creative monsters and, get good at its action elements, there are other better games that do this. I found it fine. It's like a perfectly fine one of these, but it stands out in absolutely no way I can think of as really good.
For a dating simulator, it's a really good dungeon crawler.
I think it's way better than it had to be.
Yeah,
honestly, I was expecting it to be pretty.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty fun. I think you probably have been it's very hard to compare stuff to Hades, but I thought it was like I was expecting a pretty standard dungeon crawler, and I was like, oh, this is like a little more fun. There's more variants than I was expecting. There's more types.
That's the big thing that's great, is that it has a really large number of playstyles based on the large number of weapons. That's its standout.
Honestly, I love that when I took a weapon to the next level, when I took my relationship to the next level, like I always liked the new power up, and it did make me feel very powerful running through the cheesing through some of the dungeons. Or I think that there's a huge power, like after a date goes well and you go back and play the next one, I feel like it feels different enough. Like you've leveled up enough. It's not like there's such small changes. So I did appreciate that. I thought that was nice balancing.
I think that my main issue is the sort of squishiness of it. Like this changes somewhat when you level a weapon up to max and you start getting bonuses that do things like increase your movement speed or change the way dodge rolls work or what have you. But most of the weapons, when I tried them at like levels 1 through 3, they just felt. This is the kind of like game feel stuff that's hard to really quantify. But like the walk speed is fairly pokey. The dodge roll has very few iframes, so the whole thing felt slow and pokey and frustrating in a way that I don't really like for this style of game. If I'm going to play an action game, I want one where I can feel mobile and dodge effectively. Like if I see a projectile coming towards me, all the projectiles in this game move at incredibly slow speeds, but I couldn't get out of the way of them in many cases because the character just moves what felt to me like absolutely ridiculously slow. And until I started really upgrading it with certain weapons like the dagger, Valeria, that like there's certain ways that it started feeling better. And I think once you get to like the level 6 or so with these characters, you've probably unlocked enough weapon upgrades that game feel probably turns around a bit. I only got to that level with one character and then to level 4 with another. But I tried all of the others at least to level 2, I think. Wait, maybe only level 1 on a handful. But anyway,
I think I'm just a lot more reckless in dungeons because that didn't affect me as much. I don't dodge as much. I tend to just like run around and like avoid. Like I tend to hit, avoid, hit, hide. Like I don't tend to do a lot of dodge rolls and that kind of thing. It's just not the way I play. You have to at times. Obviously, you just die if you didn't. But I
didn't run into that same problem. I think, but I do kind of agree, like, a good percentage of the time that I would die, I would be surrounded by things to a degree that were not, like, I could not kill them fast enough, and they would kill me so fast that I wouldn't even have time.
I would walk into a room and just die.
And just be dead, and I wouldn't even have time to drink my, like, 4 bubble teas. And that's kind of annoying because, like, a good dungeon crawler is like a war of attrition, right? Like you're being ground down, and then when you die, you should be like out of resources, and you just didn't make it very far. And so it is pretty annoying to die so fast that you like. I mean, it's like half a second. Like all you have to do is press the trigger button to drink a bubble tea. It's not like it's a complicated input. You just press a single button, and there were multiple times that I died faster than I was able to even press that button, and that was kind of annoying because it often felt like it wasn't my own fault. It's just the way the enemies spawned.
Yeah, I got better over time about not going as far into rooms to not have everyone notice me, or using the heavy weapon attack that pushes them back. Like I got better at that, but it took me a while to learn that because I was just stepping into some of these rooms and getting, and we're not saying it's like super hard either.
No.
But it's just that at some point you're going, because you don't level up until you leave the dungeon, at some point you're going to go deep enough that you will get people so much like that you're going to get killed by a flip phone that will kill you in 2 bites. And you're like, why flip phone? Why?
So this is another area that I think, again, I don't mean to turn this into a grouse fest. I loved the game so much, but like the majority of my enjoyment of this game came from its characters and dating elements, and not so much from the dungeon crawling, which I thought again was just sort of fine. But the other thing that sort of surprised me about this game is that it really only does have, as far as I can tell, Laura, you completed this game. I did not. But from what I can tell, it has essentially 2 dungeons plus the end boss, right? Mm-hmm. And is the end boss like a full dungeon, or is it just a boss?
It's a pretty lengthy battle, but it's not a multi-floor battle. It's a multi-stage boss battle. It's not multi-floors.
I was expecting more dungeons. 2 dungeons is a weird number to have in a game like this, right? Like, things come in 3s, man. I was really surprised.
And I think they maybe felt like it was 3, but yeah, I was expecting it to be almost like the Crypto Dancer Zelda mashup, where like the last boss is a dungeon, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I was expecting.
That's so funny because even though it's in the name, I truly was not expecting there to actually even be any dungeons in this game. Just for some reason, I
was surprised there was more than one.
I didn't know what I was getting myself into with this game, and so when you're actually like in a dungeon I was like, oh, all right, it's literally a boyfriend dungeon. Mm-hmm. It's great.
So the fact that it has 2 dungeons, I thought meant it felt a little bit like there was a little bit of a lack of variety in terms of theming, because like you do just get these 2 dungeons. There's one that's based on a mall, one that's based on a nightclub, and it's like I love that idea of like having dungeons. It felt very Persona to me that these like dungeons were like themed on other stuff, and but like more themes, man. Like, these dungeons were really, really big. I know it's a lot of extra art, but like, I would have much rather had like 5 short dungeons with different themes and more style than like 2 really large dungeons.
But you only have 2 big psychological problems.
Yeah, you're forgetting the metaphor, Raygan.
Well, when they DLC and they come out with they'll figured out all of my other brain problems.
They'll give her more complexes.
These aren't just dungeons; they're extensions of his of your character's deeply rooted issues, and you've got 2 very deeply rooted issues.
Yeah, 10 floors deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I'm done complaining about the dungeon crawling.
Which is totally fair, by the way. It's a big part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of the game. It's like 70% of the time you spend in this game. But the dating was so overwhelmingly charming and fun that it wiped out my mediocre feelings about the dungeon crawling. I was left entirely charmed by this game, even just off of that 30%.
Yeah,
including the amount of little dialogue asides you get when you are dungeoning with these characters.
It's great.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sprinkling that into the dungeons made the dungeons a lot more tolerable because you are getting these little character moments throughout.
Yeah, there's hangouts. So I mentioned one at the beginning, or recently, the massage chairs. But you basically like encounter things that you would find in a mall, and it just happens to be that there's no monsters in this moment, so you get a nice little character development moment with your date. And then also one thing I appreciated is that, as we were saying, as you fight through the dungeon, you're leveling up your romance basically, and then it caps, and you can't go to the next level with that person until you go on a bona fide date. They have to text you. This game has a lot of texting, which makes it also feel more real. So you can be dungeon crawling. Each level you go down, you can switch to a different weapon. So there's like a little bit of that like tactical, like I'm not going to waste my time on it, which I did appreciate, because if you really want to go on a deep dunge dive, but you're right at the cap with this character, it'd be annoying to have to finish out the whole thing or just like go and die. But they let you switch out weapons, so you can do multiple different dates on one dungeon dive, and I thought that was nice, and it served both a practical purpose but also a thematic purpose, because you got to just date all your favorite weapons.
Yeah, I've had a lot of trouble playing with Isaac the Estoc, which is this really elegant blade I'd never seen before. Estoc? I don't know. ESTOC. Beautiful blade.
I guess I never even tried to say it out loud. I guess I thought Estoc, but Isaac was who I did. Valeria and Isaac are who I dated the most.
I found playing Isaac's weapon to be hard because it's a very precise, tailored instrument, and I am just kind of a like rough and tumble dungeon crawler. So I did find myself cheesing it a bit by maxing out my main. And then I'd switch to Isaac and like play a little bit and die, and they'd still get some credits.
It's like Pokemon. You start your magic carp in the fight,
and then you
swap.
I totally magic carped Isaac because I loved his story, and I was like, I can't play with you, hun.
Yeah,
he just kept asking me to train, and I didn't have the heart to tell him I wasn't into fencing.
Yeah,
one of the things I think is a little bit strange at first about this game is that it has this large cast of characters, but it really introduces them one at a time. So you have to go on at least one date with Isaac before you can meet Sundar. You have to go at least, I think, one date with Sundar before you can meet Valeria, and so on.
It's dungeon level related. It's not
right. That's right.
It's not actually linked to dates. It's dungeon level. So you have to get.
Yeah, sorry.
But it does make it easier to get further down the dungeon if you have dated, but you don't have to.
Yeah, like clarify. So if once you get to a certain level in the dungeon with Valeria, you will come across, this is a plot element that I thought was sort of interesting and ties into the ending, is that you'll come across weapons that are damaged and abandoned in the dungeon. And you sort of rescue them by like awakening these knocked out weapons that are chipped and broken and hanging out down in the dungeon. And, I suppose as a way of thanking you for saving them from, I don't know what the fate of an abandoned weapon in a weird dungeon is, they hit you up. You go on a date with them. But they do get introduced kind of one at a time.
Yeah.
And so while there are characters in this game for pretty much every taste, if your taste is Isaac, you may not really have to, you may stick with Isaac and get all the way up to level 6 right at the beginning and maybe do a little extra grinding and then head right off to the final boss and maybe never even meet,
Well, you'll
Sawyer
meet
the
them, but you
Glaive.
might not date them. Yeah.
Right.
You must rescue everybody to get to endgame, but you don't have to date them.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not even 100% on that because there are definitely missable characters. There's
Every
Rowan and Pocket are both totally missable.
Right, but every character in the dungeon. No, Pocket is not missable. Pocket's in the second dungeon.
Okay.
But anybody you have to rescue, again, vague spoilers for Indeg, but just saying like anything you have to rescue that's been abandoned in a dungeon, you need to pick them up. You don't have to date them.
Yeah. I found like I've got as far as I did with one date with Isaac, the Estoc, maybe we should describe them as something other than just what their blade is because like you think of them when
they have jobs.
Yeah. Isaac is a financier. He's very suave, well dressed.
Animation has him like somehow pour a glass of red wine out of nowhere and slosh it in the glass as he elegantly unsabers. And he has
very classy.
He has himself as a brooch.
What? I didn't see that.
His suit jacket has a little estoc, like his self as a blade is his like little jewelry. Just Isaac.
It's a baller move.
You very quickly meet Sundar, and Sundar was like actively not my type at all. So and because he was like he's like the second one you meet, and you meet him almost immediately in the game. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to interact with this guy, and you kind of do. You have to go dungeon crawling with him at least once. But I was immediately like, when I realized I'm not into this guy at all. I'm sure there's a great story to Sundar if you take him up to level 6, but I was just like not interested. I don't have time. So I kind of realized at that point, I think this game will let me just ignore the people that I am not that interested in. So I really focused on just the characters I found particularly appealing from.
Which is most dating sims, right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
And to give a little more context on why Sundar is trash for people who like trash, like no judgment. He's shirtless. He has...
he's got like an 8-pack.
He's got like an 8-pack. He's got
ripped.
A rose in his mouth. He's a club owner who just wants to dance with you. And the only gifts he loves are gifts of booze.
It's a type.
He's sketchy. And your mom's going to text you. You can also opt in or out of mom messages, by the way.
Which I thought was thoughtful.
It's very
Can I take a quick second to touch on that? Because I thought that was like really both good and also a really odd choice. Like the mom texts are basically just throughout the game. You get a lot of text from all the characters in the game. You can't opt out of any of those, but you also get a lot of text from your mom, who just texts you encouraging messages from time to time. I had two thoughts on this. One is that, like, first of all, I'm the target market for this. Like, I am the sort of person who, like, I have mom issues, right? Like, I lost my mom when I was in my teens, and there's certain mom stories, it's only certain ones, that really get to me in a way that I don't often like. I sometimes feel emotionally manipulated by them. But like, I saw that screen at the beginning, and it said, you're going to get texts from a character called Mom. And do you want to enable or disable these? That was not enough information for me to make that decision. I left it on, and in this case, I ended up feeling fine about it. I didn't have any issue. But from what I could tell, you can't go back and turn those off. And if I had felt like, if I was the sort of person whose mom issues were more along the lines of like, I just simply don't want to have to think about my mother in any context, then I would have, I don't know, I would have maybe, like, I appreciate that the option was there, but I didn't think it gave me enough context.
I would have liked the message after the first, like maybe a pre-one, and then after the mom text being like, keep getting messages from your mom. Because I was like,
yeah, exactly. Like let me continue to opt into it, or let me block her number. Right.
I wanted to block people's numbers badly in this game.
Well, there's a moment doesn't your cousin give you basically that option? At least it seemed like I took the option. He's like, Your cousin is like the.
I think he lets you like tell him to like lay off in terms of trying to set you up, but I think that's just a plot thing because at that point I think he's already done setting you up with people.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't tell because I said yes, leave me alone, and I couldn't tell if I had said no if he'd like still keep doing stuff or not.
I said no, and I still don't think he interrupted. But the other thing that made me think about a lot is that like I know we've kind of already talked about the reaction that people had to this game, and but a lot of that was people specifically feeling that you ought to be able to block Eric's number in the game or simply remove Eric from the game entirely. And one aspect of that is that I get is that this game at the start, it doesn't just give you a content warning, it gives you an opt-out of an entire character, right? And if it's going to let you opt out of Mom, why wouldn't it let you opt out of Eric? Like the feeling of like, and I understand they're trying to tell a particular type of story and Eric is important to the plot. It would be very difficult to just remove Eric from the story. What's the final boss going to be? And so like, I get why that's there, but I also get why if you come into this game, read the initial content warning, saying that it discusses stalking, and then it gives you it gives you a customizable, like, what are your triggers based opt out just to remove your mom from the game entirely. I can see why somebody might see that and think, oh, this game is going to be safe for me because it's giving me these opt outs. And then it doesn't give you an opt out on something that is so core to what I think is like the much more likely to upset people element of the game. So like, I just sort of felt like that tied into potentially why some people felt particularly put off by the way this game handled its content warning and its specifically stalker based content. Like they've already said, or maybe they already have patched in a more in-depth content warning, but they've pretty much said they're not planning to add an option to just simply remove Eric from the game, which fair, totally fine. But I could see why someone might expect that option would have existed given the fact that the mom opt-out exists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in user experience, it's considered a form of priming. It's if you communicate that you care about accessibility, you are going to be really looked at carefully for accessibility, for example. So once you have made a financial or more likely PR commitment to something, like it is in the world of tech, you have to, like, you are then looked at a much stronger lens.
You got to meet the expectations of the...
The expectations are much higher because especially if you're doing something that a lot of people care about. If not a lot of people have said they care about it and you proclaim you do, you are held to a higher standard. And I think this warning is setting a pretty high standard. And I'm not saying that there is a mistake, but like, if you're going to set this high standard, the content warning maybe could have, like, I would have expected to be in the game. Like, I'm not saying that I deserve a content warning, but if you're going to be, I hesitate to say a woke game, you also need to understand that there are expectations in that sphere, and they're pretty high. They're very high.
Yeah, and they've evolved. They're continuing to evolve. This is one of those areas where this feels like a bit of a moving target for devs. There's no content warnings in film,
No.
And books not really either. Like, people have different expectations around different mediums, and they also have different expectations around different kinds of material within the medium. So like, somebody doesn't go to a AAA game and expect a lengthy list of content warnings and opt-outs about the types of violence that happen in them, but they probably would in a game like Boyfriend Dungeon.
But it's more of if one exists, you need it to be comprehensive.
Yeah.
So it's, again, it's not a ding on Kit Fox. Like, they have been through the gauntlet on something, and I don't...
Yeah.
They can tell the game they want to. But
yeah, and I felt like I think I appreciated the story that they were trying to tell, and I appreciated the content warning and the opt out about the mom text, because like that is one area where like that's something that applies to me. Like that's something that like sometimes I interact with a particular type of particular pieces of media, and it has mom stuff in it that that affects my my sad brain in ways that I don't like, and I bounce off of it for that reason. And it's good to have that as a configurable option. And in this case, it wasn't an issue, but like it could potentially have been. And but yeah, I don't know. It left me coming away from this feeling like I've seen a lot of reactions about the whole content warning situation around this game and the specifics about the character of Eric and how people responded to that, that was very dismissive of people's feelings about this issue. And yes, I do think that there was a certain sort of crowd mentality overreaction to this that dominated the conversation about this game to a degree that probably didn't belong. But I also think you can't dismiss it totally. Like, it's there for a reason. And this, and you know, I don't know. I kind of get it, is what I'm saying. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about some hotties.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a fun podcast. Let's talk about Valeria.
Yeah. Like, hey, you know what? Like, it's a podcast for talking about the realness, and this is part of the game.
That is our catchphrase. A podcast for talking about the realness.
Shut up! I can't talk. I don't know how to say words.
Yeah.
Raygan's retro corner is now Raygan's real corner.
Raygan's real corner.
Realness. The realness with Raygan.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to talk about a conflicted but not problematic howdy, may I give you Valeria, the dagger?
Personally, my fave.
She's a painter. She's a street artist. She's got a little bit of baggage, but like, it's cool because she's I mean, honestly, it is weird that you're just picking up daggers in the dungeon. She's like, hey, can you not touch me? And you're like, fair. She's like, did you put me in this dungeon? You're like, no. She's like, are you sure? And you're like, yeah. She's like, okay, I can't take your word for it.
She's the only character in the game that like brings someone on your first date to make sure you're not, for her safety, right? Like, and I felt that because like it does feel weird the way that you're constantly picking up these hotties and meeting them in strange places, and then wielding them, which feels like an incredibly intimate act.
Yeah, there will be another woman in release later, but she is currently the only woman.
Yeah, there's one woman, 2 non-binary people, and the rest are men. And this game is definitely like I'm maybe we could talk about this for a moment. Like I'm a straight guy, and every single one of these people was somebody that like I was like I could date them in a game.
Yeah.
Like I've never felt so pansexual as I have playing Boyfriend Dungeon. All of these characters are.
I mean, Dream Daddy.
Let's not. Yeah, come on. Let's not go too far here.
But I did gravitate towards Valeria. Maybe that's just my like heterosexuality. But
maybe it's because it's written by Meg J of 80 Days fame, and we like her writing.
Also, that I loved her writing. I loved the writing of all of the Valeria story, and I love the character design. She's got like cool necklaces. She looks boho. I don't know. She's awesome.
Yeah, Raygan. I mean, I did this. I think I dated Valeria the most, and part of me was like, oh man, I'm just such a lame straight guy. But then it's like, oh, but her character is really cool. And I also dated Isaac for a long time too, but because his character is really cool too. But Valeria was a really interesting, and I also felt like Valeria, like more quickly you unpacked some of the more interesting elements of her. Some of the other characters, they sort of stay in that like, Sunder stays in that like party boy mode for a lot longer, and like it just felt like I got into, as Raygan would call it, the realness a lot faster with Valeria, and so that made me more like, well, I want to understand what's going on more. She needs a pepperoni pizza.
She's also super charming. Like she's like vaguely scared of ducks. And my favorite thing is she took you on a date to a museum just so you could be like, what would you steal?
Yeah.
Like that's a question. Like anybody going on a Tinder date at a museum, please, you should ask your date, which art did you see today would you steal and put in your house, and how would you steal it? That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. The next person that we meet was Seven, and probably my third favorite in the game. I liked Seven a lot for a couple of reasons. Seven is easily the most fun sword to use in the dungeon.
Yeah, and maybe
especially
just
as you power it up.
Best. And not just the most fun. It really felt like the strongest.
He's essentially a lightsaber, which is fun because his character is a K-pop idol from a band called Blade Generation. He's like a typical K-pop hottie. And I didn't get that far in his story because I ended up focusing, as we'll talk about it in a little bit, my playthrough on this game got rudely cut off by an issue that I'll talk about a little bit later. So I spent most of the time that I did I only got to play about 6 hours of this. I would have spent more time with Seven if I could have, but most of the time I spent in this game was with Valeria and with Sawyer, who we'll talk about later. But like, I really did enjoy Seven. I thought he had a lot of depth. You get a lot of games that have like, there's a famous person or an idol or whatever in the game, and there's some sort of like cliched plots about their music career ambitions or something like that. And this wasn't that. It wasn't what I was expecting in that way.
I mean, I read NSYNC fan fiction back in the day, so not intent. Like, I had a friend who was super into it, and she made me edit hers, and I was like, I've never read anything in this genre. I read other fan fiction religiously, and real people fic freaks me out. And she's like, please just, can you edit chapter 16? My readers are waiting on me. I was like, fine. Shout out to your Donna if you're listening.
Oh my God, I know you're. Oh my God, okay, that's so funny. Your Donna, if they're out there, I want to read your NSYNC fan fiction now.
She's earned it, I'm sure.
Oh
yeah.
No.
Well, my at the time 3-year-old daughter got really into Blackpink. And then that led to us getting into BTS, and I've spent a surprising to me at least amount of time listening to and watching K-pop stuff over the last year and a half. I've seen the Blackpink documentary, so I am like, I'm in it, you know. So when Seven shows up, I'm like, all right,
I'm gonna date this one.
Is this
they know their audience too, right? Because like, I think that there's probably the audience for games about dating hot swords and K-pop are like probably nearly a circle, right?
Yeah.
Well, they do, and it is written by a K-pop fan or they did their research, because there is a fangirl to Seven, and they're using the language like bias wrecker and stuff like that, which is very much K-pop. You are not supposed to like one over any of the others, and if you do, that's your bias, and it's not cool to have a bias. So Seven is a bias wrecker because they're so dreamy.
That's so funny.
Yeah. These are things I know now.
That
great.
explains it, because she kept saying that the other person of the band was her bias, and I was like,
Yeah, that's what they. So now here we are in Nate's K-pop corner.
Oh, this is
So-
wonderful.
K-pop corner.
And so if you're a fan of BTS, I think that's where this started, but it might I don't know, it could be before them. But basically, like, their whole thing is about being welcoming and like enjoying each other. And so it is uncouth in the fan base to say any member of BTS is better than any other member. But you can have a bias towards one of them. And that is your way of having a favorite without saying that they are inherently better than anyone else. At least that is my understanding of it. So, you know, if I get it wrong, tweet at me. No one ever tweets at me.
BTS stands, hit us up if you want to explain.
I mean, I'm certainly biased towards Seven because I took him into every boss battle.
Nice. I mean, understandable, because he is probably the most fun to play. I stuck a lot with Valeria, even though, like, all things considered, not my favorite weapon playstyle, but she gets really good by level 6. Yeah. So, like, her whole playstyle was this, like, she's a dagger, so a lot of it is about backstabbing, right? And the way that this doesn't really take facing into account that much, but what it does do is when you do a dodge roll past an enemy, it does a confusion thing on them. And so a lot of her thing was about like dodge rolling around, which like stuns enemies, and then hitting them with various sort of backstab-esque attacks. Not my favorite playstyle typically, but I found her so compelling as a character that I put in the work to unlock all of her upgrades, and it became really fun after I'd unlocked all of her stuff. And I'm sure that's the case with a lot of these. Like, if you put in the work with these characters, your relationship will bear fruit.
Yes.
And you get like a tiny little talent tree basically for these characters. So you do get to customize a little bit every time you level up. Every other time you level up, you get to pick from one of two sort of class features, if you will. And then you can change them if you don't like it. So you can, if if you figure out, like, I think with Valeria is one of them early on, is that, like, you either increase the range of stun or the stun or confusion lasts longer, so you can pick, like, do you want them to stay there longer, or do you want for it to be easier? It's a little bit of customization. Again, all these different things that the game is doing to try to, like, dip its toes into more complicated dungeon crawlers, or give you the feeling of a dungeon crawler without it actually being, like, a complicated system on system.
So now we're at the point where Laura gets to tell me why she thinks I'm creepy for dating Sawyer.
So Sawyer shows up as, I think, the last weapon you find in the mall. I believe even after you've beat the boss in the mall.
I think so.
So you've defeated that fear entirely. You leave and you pick up Sawyer, and Sawyer's chipped. Sawyer's down. Sawyer is a child. Sawyer's a student, presumably in university.
Sawyer's 18. Let's say Sawyer is 18 and a student in university.
In college. Sawyer may not legally be able to drink.
True.
Sawyer acts incredibly young. Very good outfit. Like, I love Sawyer's look, but Sawyer looks like a young, androgynous person. And my impression was, oh, you're a child. I am sure it'd be fun to play with a glaive, but I would want to meet you as a friend, and I think you would get a huge crush on me and want to kiss me, and I would feel bad about it. And so I thought Sawyer was adorable, did not want the little baby imprinting on me like a duckling. And so I went to lunch with Sawyer. I fed him a sandwich or them a sandwich, and then backed up. Sawyer freaked me out.
I see that. I do get it. This is a video game. You're not playing as yourself so much as a character that of indeterminate age.
True. Sawyer's just coded way younger than the other characters.
Definitely coded younger than the other.
Sunder is
characters.
Like 35.
Yeah. Some of the other characters are potentially. So I kind of read
like
most of the characters as in their 20s. And so it's not that big of a gap. And Sawyer is just so, like, the dates with Sawyer are very different from the dates with the other characters. Sawyer is very young. And a big sort of part of their story is that they're a young person who clearly, like, doesn't understand how to live on their own yet, doesn't know how to cook, doesn't have enough money to go to restaurants, so they're constantly hungry.
I mean,
all that kind of stuff.
Literally, they're like, hey, can you show me how to boil an egg? Because I keep messing it up. And that's what I was like. Yeah. I shouldn't date you. I have to date someone who knows how to boil an egg. Like,
I in real life, that is 100% a criteria I would apply to human beings. But
fair.
I found the story with Sawyer very cute, because all of their dates are them just coming over to your place and you teaching them to cook. And in video games, I like to live out fantasies, and in this fantasy, I know how to cook better than literally any other human in the world, and can teach them something about it. It was a cute story. I like.
Sure, it's cute and not grooming.
I didn't get a sketchy. I know that it's, sure, if you got a sketchy vibe off of it, that's
I'm not
fair.
saying I got a sketchy vibe off of it. I'm saying I felt like I was sketchy if I pursued it.
I think that's the same thing, but I think that
I judged myself. The game did not judge me.
Sawyer is a bit of an innocent, but not as much as you think, and it doesn't go in any directions that made me feel actively creepy. So whether I'm canceled or not for dating Sawyer,
I don't judge you.
We'll see.
I enjoyed
it. I thought they were great, and of the swords that I used in the game, they were my favorite because they had
throw, right.
It's got that. It's a lot like the like spear in Hades a little bit, because it has like a regular hit that does like a combo that does a kind of a wide attack with their regular combo, and then their heavy combo is a distance attack, and it was just a really good combo, or like a really good combination of attack styles, and it felt really good to level it up. I enjoyed that one a lot, so I stuck with Valeria until I got her up to level 6, but then I was up to about level 4 with Sawyer when I had to stop. So I recommend Sawyer. I think Sawyer is very sweet. So anyway, moving on. The next one's even weirder.
The next one is not romantic, and I'm saying that off the bat because it's a cat.
Hey, I just wanted to put this out there. Sawyer is not the youngest character in the game.
The cat doesn't count.
Well, cats can live into their 20s.
Yeah,
we don't know,
the cat
right?
could be old. Well, not the way Pocket's living. Pocket is a pair of brass knuckles. All of the dates in big quotation marks with Pocket are like chasing the cat around, and the cat's getting in street fights, and the cat is like looking for snacks, and you're just like, it feels like having a cat that's an outdoor cat is what Pocket is.
I like that this is in the game. I didn't spend really any time chasing this cat around, and I didn't even try playing with them in the dungeon, but I like that it's there. It feels like a little bit of a slightly humorous nod to the fact that there may be some players out there who are, asexual or aromantic, and if you're that at a party, maybe you go pet the cat. I've definitely had the experience where I'm at a party and everyone else is partying and having a good time, and I'm feeling awkward and going and petting the cat. And this is the that of this game. If you're not so into the smooching and you just want to pet a cute cat, you can make friends with this cat, and they turn into a cool like bladed brass knuckles kind of
like with
weapon.
claws.
It really expands the universe if it's not just humans that can change into weapons. Mm-hmm. So like, can just anything just turn into you're riding a horse and it just turns into a battle axe?
That would really hurt.
Yeah,
if you were riding,
that would hurt.
That'd
really
be bad. That'd be a really bad combo of things to happen.
Speaking of battle axe, did you guys go on the date with the where your cousin sets you up with a guy who is like a chubby guy who can turn into an axe
post launch?
Yes.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Well, because he and the woman who's a hammer are going to be DLC later, like free DLC later.
Good. That's good to know.
So when he's like,
I liked
we'll
him. I
met each
very
other
funny.
soon enough, like he's being like, I'll be added to the game later. Like
I
he and
see.
Hammer are
I liked that moment though, because it was kind of funny, because he said like it comes out like deep into a conversation with him, like, oh yeah, I
forgot I'm out of town the rest of the summer too.
Oh, that was odd. But like what I thought was funny about it was that he's sort of like, oh yeah, I can turn into an axe sometimes, but I kind of don't. I haven't in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can still do it.
Yeah.
It was very funny to me that like this is a world in which like some people can turn into weapons and some can't, but some just don't like really do that, and they kind of forget how.
Yeah,
I
thought he kind of looked like Harry from Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a little bit of a
little bigger.
Yeah.
He looks really cuddly, and so I think it'll be great to add him to the roster.
He's a surfer.
Oh yeah.
But there is one more, but it's not. So this is a bit odd. So Pocket the cat is the last one you get in a dungeon proper. You get it in the second one, like when the mall closes, or the mall you conquer the mall, and then you go to the nightclub owned by Sunder. He's like, my basement's full of stuff. Help me. You get the cat, but Rowan. I looked it up to check, but after you go in this barbecue, there's a mansion. If you're just wandering on the map and you go to this mansion, you can unlock it. Then he sends you a cryptic note, and then you have to realize that I don't want to spoil the puzzle, but it's not.
Yeah, it's like a tiny puzzle.
Tiny puzzle. If you have trouble with it, the internet has the answer. And then you get to talk to him, but it's not like. It is missable unless you're just wandering around the map. So Rowan is going to be some people's favorite. And I really liked Rowan.
He's really
Yeah.
creepy. So one thing, I'm stealing
He's a witch.
a joke or observation
Or
here.
they are a
But
witch.
I heard someone explaining that this game features 2 non-binary characters. There's the creepy non-binary and the Millhouse non-binary. And I really felt that. And so Rowan is the creepy non-binary. Those are the 2 genders of non-binary.
I'm gonna fix my notes because I had his in the notes, and that's why I keep misgendering.
Yeah,
Rowan.
apologies if I've misgendered any of the characters. Rowan, they are very, very spooky, and that's what you want sometimes. You want the spooky.
Well, Dream Daddy's had, Goth Dad.
Mm-hmm.
There's it's a type.
I really do like
exists.
Rowan, though. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of like dark matter woo woo, but he's also like tarot witch.
Yeah. I mean, I do like if I met someone and, you kind of like maybe hit it off a little bit, and then the next day they send me like a cryptic puzzle to get to hang out with them. That could be obnoxious, or it could be a ton of fun. So,
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, because I found Rowan pretty late into my playtime, because we haven't really talked about the overworld map, but the little map you walk around on, and I'd mostly just been staying in the areas that it like guides you to, and then finally I was like, I'm gonna end to end this map. I want to look at this little town. It's like, oh shit, there's an entire like character sitting here waiting. And I didn't know if it was there from the beginning, or I just recently unlocked it and I just happened to walk out at that time. Like, had no idea, but I was glad that I found him, because it is a fun character.
Yeah, I think especially Crowley is great. The bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very cool. He has a pet bird that he carries around on his shoulder. It's an albino crow, or
Yeah, I thought it was a raven, but I'm assuming, named after Aleister Crowley, but Crowley, so I assumed it was actually a crow, but it's albino, so I was like...
That's a good point. I didn't think about that as a pun.
It compliments you.
Good one.
Just
Good
nice.
one.
I love them.
Now that before we get into any spoiler territory, I did have one thing that I wanted to mention, that just very briefly as a warning, because I'd mentioned at the top of the show that this game is out on Xbox, Gamepass. And I know a lot of folks listening to the show may be subscribers to Game Pass. It's great that this game is on Game Pass. It is Game Pass is a great bargain. And also, a lot of games we've been covering lately have been on Game Pass. I think Game Pass is awesome. But also, for whatever reason, there's a lot of like jank that comes associated with Game Pass. I keep running into issues with games via Game Pass because of some weird rules that Microsoft has about how the games have to be packaged and delivered. And this game has a issue that has been there since launch that you should be aware of if you are playing the Game Pass version of this game. And for me, it killed my save, and has also prevented me from playing any more after killing my save. It won't even let me start over. The game is locked up permanently. And that is that. So if you have Xbox, there may even be other ways to trigger this. I don't know, but this is how it happened for me. If you have the game on your PC, I don't have an Xbox, so I don't know whether this happens there too. And it cloud syncs the saves just like all the other games on Game Pass, which is a very convenient feature. But in this case, it cloud syncs the saves, which then means that if you switch to xCloud, which is their cloud-based thing where you can run the game remotely from their servers on a phone or whatever. I gave that a try, thinking I'll play this on my phone a little bit that way, just wanting to experiment with it. Booted up the game, and it had not cloud synced my saves to the xCloud servers. So I thought, that's clearly not working. No harm, no foul. Close the game on the xCloud, and then booted up on my PC again, and the game is soft locked and my save is destroyed. When I boot up the game after that, it just boots to a loading screen, playing the music, and never actually gets to the main menu. And no amount of troubleshooting seems to be fixing this. I went on their official Discord, and they have no solution for this. It's just a bug that they apparently haven't been able to fix yet. So if you play this game on the Game Pass version, do not use xCloud. Don't do it. Do not use xCloud for Boyfriend Dungeon. And
Bummer.
there's it's been a real bummer. I was like right at the final. I unlocked level 6 with Valeria. I was just gonna level up Sawyer a little farther and then go after the final boss. And now I can't, and I'm just gonna have to YouTube how all of those stories conclude, because apparently there's just no way forward for me on this one. It really made me mad.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
So before I spoil the game for my co-hosts and anyone else who wants to listen past the spoiler break, I will quickly say that my final take is I really liked this. I thought this was going to be a game for people who don't play video games normally, and I'm not sure if that is the case because the dungeon is so prevalent. But if you do like video games and you like dating, this is a really good game for you. Dream Daddy, I have referred to people who have played a game before. This I would not, because, I used a controller. Like, you're actually dungeon crawling. So just keep that in mind. I think that there is a lot of good here, and the dates have very interesting storylines and great flirting. So enjoy your flirting. Yeah. How did you guys like it?
I feel like I've had nothing but great things to say this entire episode. I really enjoyed this game. It was not at all what I expected. And I thought it was a ton of fun. I do think the dungeon crawler, as Raygan called it, was, pretty simple, and there's some frustrating parts at times, but overall, like, I was happy to go into the dungeon and try out the different weapons. And then I was really happy to get back out on the scene and go on more dates. I enjoyed this game end to end. The only thing that I now on this show I've learned a little bit more of is that, like, I was basically like slowly grinding up every single character and going on like all the dates. So to me, this was not a short game. I played a lot of it, and I think I'm still at like the mid game, basically.
You gotta magic carve some of those guys.
I know. Well, now I know, and so I think I could go in and focus through it. But it's not that I wasn't having a good time while doing it. It's just sometimes for this show where we're playing on like a deadline, I'm like, come on, I thought this game was going
to. I would have changed weapons more frequently had I not been the designated finish the game person.
Yeah, I get it. And this isn't even a complaint. It was just an experience. And so if you're going into this game with no time restraints, like, I was having a great time trying, like, digging into all the stories and dating everyone and just seeing what's up. So I really enjoyed it. And I don't really engage with, like, I think 100% of the dating sims I've played have been for this show. But what I'm realizing is to just play more dating sims. I enjoy it when we do it for the show. So I'm here for it.
Yeah, I have similar takeaways from all of you guys. I will say that I think I could have preferred a version of this game where the dungeon crawling was either a little more mechanically satisfying or a little less prevalent in terms of like how much time you spend compared to the dating, which was really where I got my enjoyment out of this game. But altogether, it is a good package, and I would have liked to have spent more time with it.
Oh, the collapse of Raygan's love life. An xCloud bug. I always knew it would come to this.
Always.
So then we are leading into our spoiler break. Before we go, a little bit of admin and outro. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, which is where you'll find all of our stuff. Our webpage with our all of our back catalog episodes, including the searchable show notes page if you're curious if we ever covered something. FYI, there are episodes there that may not appear in your do not appear in your podcast app. We've been doing this show a long enough time that some of those kind of fall off the back half of the feed, and maybe there'd be good stuff you'd be interested in hearing there. There's also a contact form if you want to let us know what you're thinking or games that you think we ought to cover. You can also find us on Twitter at _shortgame, or most importantly, you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/theshortgame. And that's where you can support the show. Every one of our supporters on Patreon gets access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the show, plan things, and people... and you can share with us who you think is the hottest, and we can have big arguments about our biases in the Discord there. I will tell you all about why I think Valeria is awesome. And if you're supporting us on Patreon at the $5 a month level, you also get stickers. And also you get early access to episodes. We get those out as early as I edit them. So that can mean anywhere from a week to maybe just a few hours early. But I guarantee you, I get them to you as soon as I possibly can. If you want that early access, join us there.
Fresh out of the oven.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can find me on Twitter at Raygan K. That's RayGank. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash. And also I was on the most recent episode of Smart Podcast Trashy Books talking about romance games. So you can find me there too for 1 week. It's normally a romance books podcast. So
that was a really great episode. I enjoyed
Yeah.
that.
I giggled a lot. It was a good time.
It was a good
I'll have a
show.
link in the show notes, or you can search your podcast app for Smart Podcast Trashy Books. Maybe, and hey, dovetails with this episode quite a bit. So
does.
maybe if you've played this and feel like you want some more
Crossover
romance novels in your life, or you just want some more romance games, Laura basically listed out a bunch of good stuff there, including some stuff we may cover on the show in the future. So that was a good one, Laura.
Thank you. And Nate?
Good job. And Nate, where can people find you?
Just on the short game, and also at Nate STL on Twitter. And then also going to do one of my favorite things outside of supporting us on the Patreon. Another great way you can support us is by leaving us a nice review on iTunes. It does help, and we appreciate it every time someone takes the time out of their lives to do it. And when they do it, give them a little shout out. So shout out to the iTunes name Soul Decay.
Ooh.
They
Sounds like somebody turns into a scythe in their spare time.
Yes.
I was thinking it sounds very, right? So they said some very nice things, including that their show, or our show, was recommended to them by their college instructor, which is a little intimidating. Whatever class you're in, and our show is being cited. You might want to.
Are you
fight
sure
it.
you got the right show?
You need to go to a
Thank
different.
you to
But thank
the
you.
college instructor.
Yeah,
You
whoever.
seem pretty cool.
Thank you to that college instructor out there, and thank you to
Thank you to Soul Decay. In their note, they say they were a little skeptical at first. So it sounds like this course instructor not even
Fair.
necessarily doing a great job of promoting
hyping
the show. Yeah, but they were a little skeptical, and they decided to listen. And they're a big fan, and they're working their way through our immense backlog. So anyway, having a little bit of fun with it. But thank you, Soul Decay, for your for the time you spent and your kind words. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks very much. And here it is, your spoiler break.
So, we have talked about how the dungeons were metaphors for your fears. And so the first one is change. The second one is intimacy. And you beat this heart. And then inside the heart is Dungeon Boyfriend. Raygan, did you see Dungeon Boyfriend?
No, I didn't get to the bottom of the second dungeon
Okay.
yet.
So I will describe in more detail. So there's a heart with chains on it, and it's yelling bad things about, keep your heart safe and no one will ever hurt you. It's about vulnerability and, openness. And then whoever you bring into the dungeon's like, oh, man, that, sounds like serious therapy stuff. And you're like, yep, I'm trying to battle. So you take the chains off the heart. I'm going to say that again, not hit the mic. So you take the chains off the heart, a door opens, and you step inside the heart and you walk. And then there's this kind of like a box puppet looking thing. It's kind of pixels. And you're like, who are you? And he's like, don't you know? I'm Dungeon Boyfriend. I'm paraphrasing this, the manifestation of who you thought a boyfriend would be. And I've been with you all of your life. And I am keeping you from moving on with actual people because I am the ideal boyfriend you have always had.
Okay.
And then you're like, I don't need you anymore. And he's like, but you always will need me because you're never going to have a real relationship. And you're like, lies. And then there's not a battle, but then you basically choose your word choices, tell Dungeon Boyfriend to go away. And then you leave the heart and you have finally defeated your fear of intimacy.
It's almost like the end of Truffle Pigs.
Yes, but this almost. But this is not actually the final boss. Your own heart is not the final boss. You now have the confidence to take on Eric, who has built a katana out of the little chipped shards he has stolen from all of the people you've been dating.
See, this part I did see, and this is legitimately
it's actually creepy,
unsettling.
It's very creepy.
The first of all, the idea that he's like it's a sort of a Frankenstein thing. He's a weaponsmith, right? And so he's been, I guess, somehow chipping or like, it sounds like it's definitely assault, right?
Yeah.
But he's chipping these random weapons to get little bits of like human weapon flesh, and then just sort of like blacksmithing them together into this horrifying monster of a katana person that isn't an actual person so much as a creepy monster that
servant and
sort of obeys him.
He said he wanted a blade without the personality, but with able to withstand tactics. So he thought maybe if he took bits of everybody, it wouldn't have its own sense of self. Mm-hmm. Katana is incredibly creepy looking. She's got the seam across her neck. Do not like Katana. But so even Eric is like, Katana needs to be fixed. I need to be fixed. I need to go to therapy. I have Katana, and Katana is going to be, is the big threat. So the battle with Katana and Eric, because they're psychically linked, ends up being this like battle with all this blue stuff between them with their psychic link, and it's like negative thoughts and like self-hatred. So like whenever he feels bad about himself, it powers a Katana, and Katana's just, it's a very creepy, unsettling. It is like if Dark Link was just someone else. Like, but you were fighting both of them. That's what it feels like. And it's partly because you've come to a self-actualization that you are able to recognize Eric is in pain. That's the idea. The theme of this game is go to therapy.
Yeah.
And then literally at the end of it, Eric's like, he's like, what are you going to do? And he's like, I think I need to go to therapy. They're like, yeah, you do. He's like, I really need to, like, thank you for saving my life, but like, I think I need to go to therapy.
We all do, Eric.
Yeah,
we all do.
The theme of this game is go to therapy. So the Frankenstein-y chip thing. And so that's done. And the end of that is whatever weapons you got to level 6 and you kind of went through this with, you have like a summer's ending and you have a little date with them and you can ask them to come with you. Everyone said no to me, but like in a very loving way. It was like, no, my life is here. No, I need to go on tour. No, like we're good together, but this was a temporary thing. Like it's a very like, no, but the door is open type of come with me.
Yeah.
And then, summer romance. And then you have a beach party that your cousin throws you, and you meet everybody else you had an interaction with. So everyone else at the beach party, you have little out scenes with them, which I imagine changes depending on the level of relationship. People who you've gotten close to, you can smooch and say goodbye, and people say thanks for offering to come away with me. And then your summer lovin' is at a close, and you pack up and get on the ship. And your ship, this is not 1900. You get on a plane,
an airship,
and the doors. It's like you will return to the beach of hot people you've dated all summer. So
these hotties will return in Boyfriend Dungeon 2.
Exactly, or DLC. Because I know there's 2 more weapons, and they're not going to make people who've beat the game rebeat the game to get 2 more weapons. I don't know how they're going to do that, but the spoiler is.
Well, I mean, from what I understand, you can load a save from before the final boss.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. But that's how Eric is Katana's the creepiest thing I've seen in a while, and do not like her motion in the final boss fight. Do not. Although my favorite thing about the boss fight isn't actually part of the boss fight. It's that you, your cousin, and Eric are talking with Katana prior to the boss fight. You're in his smithery in the basement. And then it switches to the top-down chibi view of the dungeon and the map, and you get little chibi version of your cousin and little chibi Eric, and they like run away crying because they're like don't want to be part of the fight, and it's so adorable. And then it's just you and Katana and your weapon. So whoever figured that transition out, like, thank you. That really made me so happy.
I'm really bummed I am not apparently going to get to play this part of the game, so I am going to go YouTube all of the final dates for all of the characters that I was interested in, and looking forward to doing that. This was really fun. Anybody have any last spoilers? Anybody want to talk about any like particularly memorable dates or particularly surprising twists with any of the characters?
I didn't date Sundar all the way, but I dated far enough that I was like 99% sure he's a vampire. So, did you guys?
Vampires aren't real.
Yeah. Did you guys go on the date where you can follow him when he like goes to the bathroom and is there a suspiciously long time?
No. Oh, I did. Yes.
Did you follow him?
No. I did
I don't
not
follow people into the bathroom.
Yeah, I did not follow him.
I did. Well, it was more like what
warning for people potentially.
I had just told him not to lie to me, and he was like, "I'm going to the bathroom," but he definitely like. This text was like, he looks like he's lying. So I followed him. He went to an alley, and then they're like, he's with a girl, and he has the crazy eyes.
Yes. Okay, sorry, I did do that, and then I saw him out in the alley with the girl, and I don't know why I didn't put the crazy eyes thing together. He definitely seemed like he was doing something creepy out there, but I thought he was just cheating. But the crazy eyes.
But he had crazy hollow black stuff around his eyes, and they were glowing.
I don't know. People turn into weapons, though. Like I wasn't.
Well, that's not the only evidence. So then,
Raygan.
So maybe a date or two later, I go meet him on the beach with his partner who runs a club with, and they're making jokes, and they're like, she's like, do you need a snack? And then she's like, oh, is like snacks on the menu? Like, and she looks at you and he's like, no, we're not going to do that tonight. She's like, why not? Have you not told her? And they make some references to blood. And then, he's like, I don't feel comfortable telling you this right now. And he also talks about how he like can't go out during the day and sleeps in until it's nearly night, and how he's got to be back at the club before the daylight shows up. And you're like, cool, all the signals point to vampire.
And like, I can't use mirrors, and like, I hate garlic. And
it's better written than that, but it's like over the course of one scene. It's incredibly they're like, cool, snack. She's like, oh, did she bring snacks? And you're like, I brought cheesy pups. And she's like, but like, aren't you a snack? And he's like, stop it. And I'm like, oh, she's flirting with me. Like the character's like, oh, I think she's flirting with me. And he's like, she's not. It's great. So
I think every game should have one character that might be a vampire.
Yes.
Just like every game. Every piece of media, there should just be one character that you're just like, I think that one's the vampire.
Yeah.
Well, on that
note, we all agree with you, Nate.
It's cool. Again, the writing is more subtle than I'm making it. But to me, it was just like a vampire signal going into the sky.
That's great.
I love it. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you guys. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about this one. A little bit of preview for anybody who's waited this far into the episode. Next week, we should be talking about 12 Minutes, which is also on Gamepass if you have that, and also on a bunch of other platforms. It's from Annapurna. And then the week after that is Question Marks, but we have some good ideas, so let us know if you have a suggestion. And thanks so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.
Bye.